Welcome to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. Join me each week as I interview experts who will share the science of sugar, sugar addiction, and different approaches to recovery. We hope to empower you with the information and inspiration, insights, and strategies you need to break up with sugar and fall in love with healthy whole foods so you can prevent and reverse chronic disease, lose weight, boost your mood and energy. Feel free to go to my website for details on my coaching programs and to access free resources, kicksugarcoach.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. I'm here today with Annica Strandberg-Schmidt, who is from Sweden, and she is one of us. She's a sugar addict, food addict in recovery. She has her own story of recovery, and she's since gone on to become multiply trained in sugar addiction recovery with Bitten. She works with Bitten. So let me just catch some highlights from her bio here. She makes keto food plans for sugar addicts. She's a sugar addiction therapist. She's sugar licensed, which is an assessment that Bitten Jonsson put together that helps assess whether or not you actually fall on the sugar addiction spectrum, whether you're a harmful user or whether you truly have an addiction in play. She is also an author. She's an instructor in conscious breathing, which we'll do a little bit in our call today. She's certified in relapse prevention therapy. She has a YouTube channel where you can find inspiration and information. She's a tutor working with Bitten in her sugar training program. And in particular, she has a very special interest and expertise in working with families and children, like how to help children to reduce or eliminate their consumption. And let's see what else. She lives on a dairy farm in Western Sweden with her husband and 3 children. Welcome, Annica.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
So let's start with your story. So when did you first have the idea that maybe, oh my goodness, I think I might be addicted to sugar?
I really don't remember the first time I was thinking that thought, because I always had problems with sugar or sweets or whatever. But I know that really my mother said sometimes that, I'm like an alcoholic, but I'm doing it with sweets instead. So maybe that's somewhere there my own thinking about that started. But I was I think I was about 18 or something when I really hit the bottom and realized that my eating was causing me a lot of trouble, and especially mentally. I was really mentally ill. I didn't feel well at all. And so that was the worst symptom for me, was the in the end, when I really hit rock bottom, that was when I had suicidal thoughts, really, because of what I ate, really. So, but I think I was about 18 when I really realized that I had a big problem, and it got consequences in my daily life. Yeah.
And then what happened?
Oh, what happened? It's a long journey. I remember I was, I think, 28. So it's 10 years later when I really searched for help or asked for help. And before that, I was on a diet. I was off a diet. I was exercising. I was restricting. I was binging. I was, doing everything, trying everything out. And my health and my mental health was going the same way, up and down all the time. And it took me approximately 10 years, I think, from when I really understood that there might be something called sugar addiction, because at first I just, heard about it, like my mother was saying stuff like I told you. And then I actually read in a newspaper and it's a famous comedian here in Sweden that also has a sugar addiction, and she was talking about it. And she was putting down the uncope questions. I don't know if you heard about it, but that's what we do when we screen for sugar addiction to see if we need to do a sugar interview. And she had put those 6 questions in the interview, and I was ticking the boxes, all of them. And I was like, oh my God, I might be a sugar addict. And from that, it took me approximately 10 years before I was sitting at the table, my kitchen table. My oldest daughter, she was 3, and my son was 1 year old. And I was writing on my suicidal letters because I didn't want to live anymore.
Oh, Annica. Wow.
So that's really what happened. There is so much, going on during this time, but I mean, sitting there, newly married, we just bought our house. We had 2 wonderful, healthy, amazing kids, and we just started planning on buying the farm, and we had two kettles and cats and a dog, and from outside everything was so happy-go-lucky, and I didn't want to live anymore. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together at that time. But then I realized I had read a book about how one could eat differently and maybe feel better, And I don't remember how I really got my hands on Bitten's first book, about the sugar bomb book. But I remember really reading that book, and that was Kathleen de Maison. Is that her name?
De Maison.
Yeah, de Maison, yeah. That was when I realized that it wasn't about eating gluten-free or everything. She was talking about, for me then, that was hardcore, taking all the sugar and flour away, really. So, but that's when it really started, until I got in contact with Bitten, and I got my treatment, really. And it was the social service here in my area that paid for my treatment. And if they hadn't done that, I wouldn't be alive today. So I'm really grateful for that.
Wow.
I was the first one, and I was the last one in this area, because they realized they couldn't afford to send all the sugar addicts. So I'm trying to spread the message, in this area. Yeah. So it's a long story in a shorter version.
Yeah. And it is for all of us. It is. It just takes years
Yeah.
of trying things and failing, and then eventually going, you know what? I can't out diet this problem. I can't out exercise this problem. I can't even out therapy this problem. I can't out pray this problem. I'm just going to have to abstain. I'm just going to embrace being a whole food woman. So once you started to work with Bitten, you've been on again off diets, trying this, trying that, but it was just continuing to erode your love of life, your desire to live. And you met Bitten, and she put you on a treatment plan. Tell us about what the early days of recovery looked like for you.
The early days, it was hope, but it was so much fight, white knuckle, to just abstain. And the decision every morning, no matter what happens, today I won't eat, eat sugar and so on. But I was since I got the treatment plan together with Bitten, but then also together with the treatment center here in my area, I kind of had a safe place to go for 4 hours every day. I went there, and it was like turning my life upside down totally, because I had to carve space for myself, for my recovery. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done. Really, really. I'm kind of a compulsive helper. I love doing that. So
you're a compulsive what?
Helper.
Got it. Okay.
So for me, telling my kids that I need half an hour this morning, you can sit beside me, you can play with your toys, I'll help you if you need to go to the toilet or whatever. But I need 15 minutes, 30 minutes. I want to sit here and read. I need to do my breathing or whatever. I need to make phone calls. And once or twice a week, I think I went to meetings and so on. So that was really hard for me. I don't know how to explain it to someone who hasn't been like I was, but that was really hard. And then, of course, I mean, learning everything about food, because there were, oh, I mean, this is 13, no, it's 17 years ago. And to start at that point, that was when the low carb community started, and there was so much in the media and everything, and they were telling that low carb was dangerous and you're going to die from it. And so I just had to hold my hands over my ears not to hear all of that, because that was feeding my disease all the time. And I was so scared, because I just I just had to go close my eyes and keep going. I keep going one day at a time and see what happens. And I'm still alive. So
Wow. Yeah. So that was 17 years ago that you first connected up with Bitten and
yeah.
started to do the walk, the path of recovery. And the heart, it is one of the hardest parts, carving out time to actually do this self-care, really basic self-care, like making sure that we plan our meals and that they're wholesome and we take time to eat them and we take time to rest and relax and have fun. And right, like why this should not be a hard thing.
No. No, that's true. And I think that's one of the things that when I work with families, that's one of the things that I often meet, because it's very usual, it's very common that a parent come to me and ask me to fix their kids, kind of. And it's also very common that the parent himself or herself has an addiction which they haven't addressed. And if they don't do the work, they can't help the children. That's that's what it ends up in, kind of. You can do some changes, of course, but I mean, if the parent isn't ready for doing the change themselves, then it won't be a sustainable change. So,
Right.
and that also means, I mean, for them to start to take care of themselves, and that's really one of the hardest thing we do.
It
Or
really
I
is.
do. Yeah.
It really is. And maybe not everyone, maybe if you're listening and you're in retirement, you've got space and you've been able to sort of dial that in a bit, but it's harder when you're busy, like you've got families and jobs and parents that are aging or whatever projects. And
Yeah.
you think I'm too busy to do it. And you're too busy because you're not doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're too busy because you're not doing it. You don't have perspective on priorities. You're trying to do it all. Often we're in these fight and flight. There's these unconscious fears and feelings and that are driving this level of overgiving and overdoing. And we can't see it.
No, and I'm thinking about what you said about not having the time, because that was my hardest thing, to feel. I felt that I didn't have the time, because when I went in recovery, I got my treatment. We just started our dairy farm here, so we were working 24/7, and I had to just say, I need to go away for 6 hours every day, and I'll leave you with the kids to my husband. And yeah, but I'm so grateful, because both my mother and my husband's mother and father, they were always there helping us, and my father, of course, helping us out with the kids, because my husband, he couldn't stop working. We had 24/7. Yeah. So, and where was I going with that? I don't know.
I think it
Yeah,
was
making time. I'm thinking, not to be rude or being grandiose or whatever, but sometimes I'm thinking that I I didn't have time. I made time, because I wasn't between the milking in the morning and the afternoon. I had to cook, I had to clean, I had to wash. I had two kids, 1 and 3 years old. I had the treatment, and I was making phone calls. I was writing. I was doing step work. I was going to meetings. And sometimes when I look back at that time, I don't know how I even survived. How did I do that? Because today I wouldn't be able to do it. And I'm happy I did it then, and I don't have to do it now. And now my kids are grown, but it feels like I think I just need to or want to give hope to parents or in the middle of life, like you said, having old parents that you need to care for. There is always a way to make room for your recovery, and no matter what, there is always you're always able to make some kind of space, but you have to adjust it to your individual way of living and so on. I
Mm.
don't know how many times I've been running around, with the phone in my ear, milking cows and doing this and that and caring for the kids. And maybe I wasn't being very present at the time, but
Mm.
it gave me something. And now I'm able to be present in another way. So yeah, you can look at it from many angles.
Yes, and I found that for me that I had to slow down to be able to plan and prep my meals.
Yeah.
And I have still to this day, it's less intense and it's less frequent, but I literally feel like I'm having anxiety attacks in the kitchen. I don't know what it is, and I haven't been able to entirely pinpoint it, but it's this feeling of ain't nobody got time for this crap. Like I have to wash and chop and measure, and like it was just like it was slowing me down, and it made me reckon with the fact that there was something underneath me that was full of fear, driving me to doing, and my recovery required me to forced out of hiding this secondary sort of addiction, this being busy, the working, driving, doing, right? And you can't have that addiction in play while you're trying to recover from food addiction, because food
Yeah.
addiction requires you to slow down and prioritize self-care and to get into the kitchen and treat your body. And that time in the kitchen is precious when everything in your system's like, I ain't got time for this. Come on, how can I just do this quick? Oh, forget it. I'm just going to grab something fast. And then you're off in the ditch, right? And it's not everyone's story, but it's quite a few of us. And there's an expression that actually comes out of the emotional eating recovery world that men and women who overeat, sorry, who overwork and are overwhelmed, overeat. And
And
it's
overbreathe.
and overbreathe. Tell me about that. Go there.
That's what we joke about this, Bitten and I, because we say we're overeaters, overbreathers, overdoers, over whatever. If you can do something more, you do it, kind of. And when we talk about breathing and over breathing, most people think that we kind of uh, uh, breathe fast and so everyone can hear it, like you've been running and you're painting, really. But that's not what's happening. But usually, if you're not conscious about how you're breathing up in the chest, high up in the chest, and you're breathing with your mouth open. And that makes a kind of over breathing that's not good for you. That makes you stay in the flight state of mind, so to say. And also a lot of biochemical things happening in your brain and in your body that also keeps you in the fight and flight mode during the day, where you want to go and do this, do that, because your all your body and your brain thinks that you're being haunted by something, which you are, your thoughts or whatever. But yeah, so overbreathing is really something that's connected to this as well. It is.
So, how does one start to turn that over breathing? Like I'm not a mouth breather. Do you have to be a mouth breather to be an overbreather?
No.
Okay.
No, you can overbreathe even if you breathe through your nose, because the way when we do the conscious breathing work, we learn to breathe with our belly, and
Mhm.
that's also one thing that is very difficult for us. Not all of us, but most, because we are very and we are very conscious about our body, and we have a very unpleasant feeling when we need to connect with our stomach. We most of us wants to what do you call it, when you make the stomach smaller, you try to hold it in and,
Suck it
and
in,
suck it
constrict it.
in, yeah, and you can't do that and be a good breather. You have to relax and really let your belly relax and let it go. and make sure that your diaphragm is what is making you breathe, because that really helps your whole system, from your body, and it's working together with lymphatic system and everything. And the diaphragm helps the lungs, and it helps the heart, and it helps, well, every part of your body. And you can, I mean, when we do the nose breathing or the breathing exercises, you really need to feel that you are working with your stomach, and that can take some time before you realize where your breath is really going, when you breathe.
Yes. And this very much ties back into trauma work in the sense that the psoas muscle at the bottom will brace, right? It'll brace and it'll tighten, and all the muscles will tighten, and it can actually be painful and uncomfortable for people to take deep belly breaths. And so that's when the trauma recovery work comes in, where we learn to release some of the stored grief and tension that's in our muscles that tighten the diaphragm, that makes it very difficult and uncomfortable, sometimes painful for deep breathing.
Yeah.
So you start to eat whole foods. You're working with Bitten 17 years ago. You're really at bottom. You're writing suicide letters. You have no hope anymore. And how quickly did things start to turn around for you mentally?
At once. I mean, the suicidal thoughts went away when I started eating whole foods.
Like, was it days? Was it weeks? Was it months?
Days, I think. I mean, I still had to do some work with myself because I had anxiety attacks, and that didn't stop. I mean, that took me some years to handle that. But the feeling of that I didn't want to live, that it wasn't worth living, that turned in a couple of days, or I could say weeks to be really
Weeks, yeah.
safe. Yeah. But for me, it was for 3, 4 days, really. I think it started turning. But then, of course, I had a lot of work to do to handle life, because I didn't have the tools for handling life, for being alive. So, yeah, but that changed really quickly. But also, that's one of my weak spots. So if I don't, and even if I take care of my recovery, we know that the illness really is it can get worse even if we are in recovery. I don't know the English word, but it can really, like if you have MS, you can get worse even if you're in recovery, and it's the same with addiction. And so that's one of my weak spots. So if I'm having a bad period in my life and something happens with my addiction, my mental health is the one that gets shaky, so to say. But now I know that, so I can use my tools, and I can ask for help, and I can have some extra fat or whatever, really taking care of myself in another way. I didn't know that then. And I didn't know what food had done to me, or food. I don't know if we could call it food, really, but
Right. The junk, the garbage.
Yeah.
Right, right, right. So interesting. So very quickly you could feel a difference in your mental well-being, and then you could see that you all of a sudden realized that you were going to need to learn some new ways of coping with stress, with the anxiety attacks that you had, with the day-to-day stresses on your system. And what were some of those tools that you brought in to help you be able to meet the challenges of life in a way that felt resilient and didn't drive you back into the arms of sugar?
The tool that I used the most was reaching out, calling, and telling someone else in recovery what was going on and how I felt.
Mhm.
Because I always got, I mean, I had some special extra friends in recovery, and it didn't matter what I was telling them, I feel like this, I did that, I'm thinking like this, and they were, oh, I've done that, oh, I'm doing that, and that's such a relief, because I was always comparing my inside to others outside, and I was always coming short in that comparison. So for me, it was really wonderful to having someone to reach out to all the time. And I think that's what made the difference for me, because I was living only in my head. I was overthinking also. and thinking that I was wrong all the time. So sharing that and getting helps with strategies. If I was going away, to make sure I had planned my food or taking care of stuff, and having my routines like getting up, reading a text and doing my writing or whatever. And to have that with me all the time. But I think the sharing really and telling on my disease when that was talking to me. And that wasn't only, the disease isn't only saying eat sugar. It's like I'm a bad person, or all those thoughts that you can have about yourself. For me, that's the disease talking, and that's what I need to tell others about. So, and also get the confirmation from others that I'm okay, even if I'm having these thoughts, or even if I did something wrong, it doesn't mean that I am wrong, I'm a bad person or whatever. So I really think the calling, and I know that that was one of the things that my husband found very hard, because I was a lot on the phone to start with. But then he saw the change as well. So he was more, more and more into wanting me to make phone calls. And I remember my oldest daughter, I think she was 5 at the time, and I was being upset about something. I was really angry, and that doesn't happen very often. And she turns to me, her lovely little face turning to me, looking me in the eye and say, "Mom, can you go call someone?" So so she really connected the two dots, Okay, mom is angry, she's making a phone call, and then she's happy. So yeah, that really helped me a lot. Yeah.
Right. And the more that the world is discovering and embracing and putting into practice that, the work of Stephen Porges with the polyvagal theory, he would say that when we're in the stress, response, or even in the trauma response, and we use sugar or alcohol or work or whatever to medicate ourselves, we're still doing this solo, right? It's an attempt at self-regulation, but it's really not regulation. It's just trying to manage the fact that we're dysregulated, we're in incredible pain, distress, overwhelm. And so we're using sugar or whatever we're using to try and manage the symptoms, but we're not really regulating our system. But what you're describing is co-regulation, where you're getting back out of having a relationship to inanimate things and turning to have relationships with real people where we can co-regulate. We can get back into community, into connection, into relationships where we're heart-centered. And that is the ultimate healing. The whole reason we give up our addiction is so that we can give and receive love again. And how fun is it in the early to be able to find people who feel so safe, because they're like, oh yeah, I've dug cookies out of the garbage too. Don't worry. I've done that too.
Yeah, I'm having goosebumps when you say it, because that's really what it is about, to being able to connect for me. I think that's really, and I'm thinking about, I don't know if it's the correct word, because if you say that you have a stroke here in Sweden, you really have a heart attack or something. But to have the kind of stroke, I mean, when someone's stroking you or being kind to you,
Yeah.
that's something. It feels like that to me when I'm receiving what I got from my, and still get from my recovery squad. It feels like they're stroking my back, or soothing me in some way, and that's really my whole nervous system calming down, and I'm being able to connect into intimacy, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that is the whole reason we give up our addiction, is to be able to turn to people to get the connection and the comfort that we're looking for when we, binge eat potatoes or whatever, chocolate or whatever, right? Yeah. Amazing. How beautiful. So in the early days, it sounds pretty clear that your family was noticing that you were unhooking from using sugar to feel better, and you were starting to turn to people to build relationships. And to co-regulate your nervous system that way. And so tell me a bit more about some of the other changes that your family saw in you as a mother, as a wife.
Well, when it really started to, I mean, I think the connection was really central, because I was able to connect to my children and to my husband as well. And that, I think that happened bit by bit. I mean, it's not like it's happening from day one and you just turn it off or turn it on, so to say. But I know that now my husband is saying to me that if you hadn't changed, well, he wasn't thinking like that now, but when he's looking back, if I hadn't done the transformation that I had done in recovery, I don't think that we would be married today, he says.
Mhm.
So that really says something about the connection and the way of acting. And also it's not always very pleasant, because I've also and still am practicing to stand up for myself, putting boundaries and that stuff. So it's not always an easy journey, but I think that what they saw was me, like my kids, go call someone so you can stay calm. That they put those of us together, and also for me to be able to be here and now, because when I was active when they were small, I mean, my son was 1 and my daughter, she was 3 when I entered recovery. And I remember, locking myself into the small room where we had all the food. And I was locking myself into this little room because I didn't want my kids to see me eat like this. I didn't want them to have the addiction. And I mean, that's not connection, to lock yourself into a little room, sitting there eating, and then going out and pretending everything is okay. So when I was really able to connect with my kids, and also all the work that I was doing with them, uh, to be able to ask them, how do you feel? I can see that you're angry, but you're not allowed to hit me, or, to be able to put words on questions or feelings, I mean,
Mhm.
and ask questions. Be curious about, who are you? This is me, and who are you? I mean, really having a deep connection. And the further I went in recovery, the deeper the connection with the kids and my husband, of course. So, yeah.
Incredible, incredible, right? It's not just saving one life, not just a beautiful Annica, but what a ripple effect, right down to children that are going to grow up with a mother whose presence and love is available to them, so they can learn to co-regulate. So they never need to lean on something inanimate like junk, junk food to
Yeah,
feel
and
better.
even if they do, because they have the genetics, but even if they would do someday, they know where to go to have the knowledge. And even if I'm not the one who should give them the knowledge, I know where to send them.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the work that you do with families. So, where do you start with families?
With the parents, it's always with the parents. And I'm doing that as I do with food plans. It's always individual. It depends on what family, where do they live, where do they want to go. Because even if I mean, for me, I need to abstain totally. I'm not having sweeteners. I'm not having nothing, because I'm an addict.
Mhm.
I don't do harm reduction. But when I work with families, sometimes you need to do harm reduction with the kids. And that's because we live in a society that is so sweetened all the way, so to say. You have to be able to cope with school, going to parties, having a party, all that stuff, because it's sweets all over. And some families are able to take their kids off sugar totally, and they do that, and I'm supporting that. But they do a lot of work. And but you really, I mean, it depends on who you are and where you want to go, sort of. Because I mean, my youngest daughter, she's 13. She didn't have any kind of sugar until she was 4. And no potatoes or rice or whatever. She was low carb, probably keto, when she was up to 4 years or something.
Oh, wow.
Uh, but then she started to, when we went to parties or children parties, she was starting to say, Mom, you don't have to bring a box for me or any sweet. I'll just abstain, I won't eat anything. And I was seeing that she was feeling very, very awkward about the things that I was doing.
Mhm.
And that's when I had to make other strategies, because I didn't want to push her backwards into, you're not allowed to. So then I made up some other strategies, like, and that's what I'm really, helping families with. And also in my book, I write about this. But I mean, if you're going to a party, make sure your kids are having a good meal before you go with a lot of protein and fat. Make them have one portion of whatever they are eating. And if they're having a candy bag with them home, pick 2 or 3 candies they want and save the rest for whatever, or throw it away, or but making that kind of strategies. If I mean it's also about listening to the kids. Even if they want to have sugar all the time, they can't have that, but you also need to listen to them, because they don't choose to be my kids. If you understand what I mean. If I was in charge, I would never give them sugar or sweeteners or flowers, but we're not living in that kind of society. So I had to choose a middle way, really. And some is going the whole way and having no sugar, and some are just, not doing, I shouldn't say not doing anything, but they learn about it, and then they really don't do much about it, but they try to, and so on. And I think that the most important thing is that we have the knowledge, and we put some seeds in, because it's like I said, for me, it took 10 years before I realized that there is something called sugar addiction, until I really realized I need help. So for every seed we can plant, if it's in small children or in the parents or whatever, that's it's so important, because something can happen later on. It's like I said with the kids as well. Even if I can't have them totally off sugar, and with my kids, I don't even want to think about what my oldest kids are eating right now. But they choose themselves, and if they need help, they know where to go. And then it's not shameful to talk about sugar addiction. It's not shameful to be overweight. It's not shameful not to be able to handle foods or sugars or whatever. It's not shame. It's not guilt. And there is a solution. And that's a big difference from the way that I had it. I was feeling guilt. I was feeling shame. I mean, I was hiding it from everyone. It's like one of the questions in Uncope is if anyone have ever complained about the way you were eating. And 90% of of anyone getting that question is saying no. So now we kind of remade the question, and now we're asking if anyone knew how you were eating, would they say something about it or complain? And now 90% says yes.
Sure.
Because we don't do it in public.
Right. It's very shameful, very sneaky. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the solution. So what are the components of the solution in your opinion?
Well, first of all, it's the food, to abstain from sugar and flour and sweeteners and so on. And for me, I'm totally keto, and that's where I thrive, and that's also where my mental issues are non-existent at all. I tried to have a little of this and a little of that, but I can't go there. So for me, it's the food, of course. That's the bottom of everything, but also the meditation, the writing, journaling, making sure I've done my stuff today, and planning what will I do tomorrow? What will I eat tomorrow? Is there anyone I need to talk to tomorrow to make things right or whatever? And I also keep asking questions, being curious, and I continue to help people in different ways. Not only in my work, I also want to do some work for free, like helping others from that point of view as well. I think that's important. And
right.
yeah, I don't know. I think if you would have asked me to start with, I would have been able to pinpoint it even more. But now it's so into my daily life, so I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about your keto meal plan. So what do you eat in a day?
I make sure that I have breakfast when I wake up. I'm a breakfast eater, and I also learned that it's important for everyone to not put the starve mode on, so to say. So I'm having a bulletproof. I don't drink coffee, but I mix egg yolks, butter, MCT oil, and hot water, and I spice it with some vanilla powder, saffron sometimes, and yeah, some like that. And I drink that and have it together with bacon or eggs or leftovers from the dinner or whatever. And then during the day, maybe I'm having some coconut oil with hot water or tea. I'm drinking too much tea. So I'm having the tea and coconut oil. And then I'm having a lunch with vegetables of some kind, white cabbage, that's my favorite, or green cabbage, or yeah, whatever I can find. And usually whatever my husband has been growing outside in the garden. And together with animal protein of some kind and fat. And usually I don't eat anything after the lunch. I'm having an eating window of 6 to 8 hours, depending on if we're going away or having dinner with someone. I would eat in the evening as well, but that's how I do it. And then my measuring today is to make sure that I have the for me, right combination and levels between fats, protein, and carbs. That's the tracking that I'm doing today. That's my food plan. When I started, I was weighing and measuring everything because that was what's making my mind quiet. My brain wasn't speaking to me or asking me questions about food when I was weighing and measuring. So that was my way of going. And I find that when I'm doing the tracking now, that's what keeps my mind quiet. But if I would have done the tracking 17 years ago, I would have been obsessed about it. So I don't think that that going into keto, how shall I say? I think that the way that I'm eating right now, it's hardcore keto, if you understand me. But when I'm doing a food plan for someone in early recovery, I'm not telling them to track anything. I'm looking for, are you a person who are able to weigh and measure your meals? Would that make you obsessed, or would that make your mind go crazy or quiet? And then having 3 meals a day, in the right combination. But I'm having, like for every meal, fats, carbs, or not carbs, but vegetables. That's carbs, but but not, like potatoes and stuff, and some kind of animal protein, animal-based protein. So, but for me, I'm having the 2 meals usually.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. And I can imagine that, as you said, that evolved over many, many years.
Yeah.
And what happens when you meet somebody who says, I don't like animal protein, I don't like, I mean, I can maybe do a little here and there, but generally speaking, I prefer whole food plant-based protein options. How do you work with them?
I don't work with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not honest. If I'm doing that, I wouldn't be honest. I
Yeah.
would only be after the money, and I'm not. So, but I have people that I can refer to or ask this person instead. So I'm not saying that my way is the only right way, but I'm not doing that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I just have to kindly direct them to someone else.
Yep. Got it. So you're very, very in the keto space. Got it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, is there any final words you would like to say about sugar addiction recovery?
Addiction rules. That's what I'm coming back to all the time. It doesn't matter if I'm doing breath work, if I'm eating keto, if I'm meditating, if I'm learning a lot about nutrition and knowing a lot of stuff. If I'm not taking care of my addiction, I'm not going anywhere. So addiction rules.
Wow, powerful. Thank you so much for your time and your interview today, Annica.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you would like more interviews, more information, and more inspiration on how to break up with sugar, go to my YouTube channel, Kick Sugar Coach, or my website, kicksugarcoach.com. See you next week.